welcome out there in podcast land. You have reached Johnny Has the Keys, and we are so glad you're listening to us today or tonight or whenever you are listening to us on whatever platform you so desire to listen to us. We're a podcast about horror, science fiction, references, keys, things that influenced us, and hopefully that these movies influence later, and maybe you too. My name is David, and I'm here with my good friend Tim. Hey, Tim, how are you?
Hey, David, I'm doing well. It's good to hear you.
You too.
It's been a while.
You too. Yeah, it has. Yeah. And we're getting back in the groove of this again. We're deep into the second season, which is great. And that's thanks to all of you guys out there listening to us and liking us and giving us reviews and hopefully even becoming Patreon members sometime. That would be awesome. But what have you been up to, Tim? What have you been doing, tooling around doing?
Oh, yeah, that's right. We usually talk about something interesting that's happened this week, genre-related. And I'm trying to think. The only thing that comes to me off the top of my head is that I finished Castle Rock, and we've talked about it a couple of times here now.
Okay. Ironically, that was going to be one of my mentions. I haven't finished yet, but I have gotten further into it. Mm-hmm. So I'm curious, what do you think?
I like it better than the first season.
Ooh, okay.
But very similar to the first season, the last episode, it winds up both subplots, because there's really two plots going on in this season. But one of the subplots is kind of ended a little fast, which I felt the same way about the first season. But other than that, I really liked it. I mean, I thought it was cool. It reminded me of those old 70s paperbacks you would read, like Charles Grant's Hour of the Ox Run Dead, where you'd see the little byline, the town knew evil, or whatever, because, it's one of those ancient evil stories that possesses a town. So I thought it was really cool that way.
Well, so by two subplots, you mean Annie Wilkes' story and then the Marston house, essentially, or the whole Marston
the evil town story. Yeah, the evil town story. You've got all the people that are being, Invader of the Body Snatchers style taken over. They're, becoming something else. And then you've got Annie Wilkes' little storyline there because she's passing through town at the time. So there's your king, your direct king connection character-wise, and then the towns, of course, are towns in his novels. So.
Well, and I kind of watched it in sections. I watched like the first 2 or 3 episodes. Then I took a break, and then a couple of weeks ago, I watched the next like 3 episodes. I think I ended where one of the characters had a death in a church. So that's where I stopped.
Yeah.
And I've got to admit, I was thrown off by the pod people kind of aspect. The fact that they can talk and think and do and whatever. They're not like, they're not zombies. They're not vampires. So I'm curious to see what they do to resolve that. That'll be interesting.
Well, and they're actually a little bit more than even what you think. You may not know yet, but you'll see.
Okay. Cool.
There's a reason they can talk and think and stuff. One of the reasons I really kind of like the show is I can't get Dennis to watch horror movies or anything, and that's predominantly what I watch. So he has watched American Horror Story with me. He got into the Diva season with the witches, which just about any gay man could. But those shows are just so bad, and as we've watched the last few seasons, we didn't even finish the last one. I talked him into watching the Castle Rock shows with me, and he sees the difference. I mean, he actually likes Castle Rock, and he's like, this is so much better than that other show. And I'm like, yeah, there's a lot better stuff out there than American Horror Story. Just believe me.
Oh, yeah.
So it's kind of interesting that I can get him to watch those with me. So I
that's
enjoy
good.
It for that reason. Yeah. So, and he doesn't read Stephen King. He's never read a Stephen King book. So.
And I guess my genre thing is the 4th season of The Expanse is coming out, and I want to get ready for it. So I've started rewatching the 3rd season to get there, and just so enjoy that series. I mean, from a science fiction standpoint, it is just awesome. It is such a great series. I highly recommend it to everybody. The characters in it are great. The science works. The whole, a multi-system wide story arc is working for me. So I'm really curious to see where they go in season 4 with that.
I need to revisit it. I started watching season 1 and somehow I never finished it.
Yeah, you need to get into it.
Yeah, it wasn't because I wasn't interested. I just somehow, media inundation.
Yeah, same thing with me with Castle Rock. I have to keep going, oh yeah, I haven't finished that. I need to go back.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
I'm still one episode away from the end of Handmaid's Tale, 2nd season. And the 3rd one's already been out, and I haven't even touched it. I'm like, oh, I need to catch up on that sometime too, because that'll just depress the hell out of me. But it is. Have you watched any of that?
God damn you, Elizabeth Moss. Damn you all to hell.
Yes. She's brilliant in it, but oh my God, it's depressing.
Have you seen... Oh, here's another little one. Have you seen the trailer for her version of The Invisible Man?
Yes.
Looks pretty good, doesn't it?
I have to admit, yeah, I was going, okay, that looks good for a reboot or remake or whatever. That looked really good. I was impressed with that.
Yeah. I mean, I love these old horror movies, especially the Universal ones. I think I may have mentioned before I watched a series of documentaries on Amazon about Universal and about Hammer and some sci-fi thrown in at the end. And I mean, I don't want to see it. It's rare that I like a remake, but I'm always interested to see stuff that old revisited. You know what I mean?
I agree with that.
BBC. Yeah, BBC has a new Dracula coming out. That's got my curiosity going up too.
Well, and the thing is, based on what I saw in that trailer, you could have called this, Silent Killer. You could have called it Now You See Me, Now You Don't. It's not The Invisible Man. It's not the story of The Invisible Man.
Right.
It looks totally different, which is fine with me. So why call it The Invisible Man? Why call it a remake other than a marketing ploy to get, it's like when it finally happens, because I also saw the trailer for James Bond and went, okay, yeah, that looks good again. I've liked Daniel Craig as James Bond. I think that'll be great. But the big rumor is this is his last one, and the girl in it is going to become 007. And I said, and if that happens, I'll just be incensed because it's why. He's 007. He is James Bond. You don't reuse the number. They don't even do that in sports. you know? I mean, she can be 0022 or 009, whatever. But she's not 007, But that's what everybody says. She's going to be the new James Bond. And that's, not true because obviously the character is not called James Bond, but we'll see. We'll see. I don't know.
H.G. Wells, Invisible Man. Remember how they were doing that? Francis Ford Coppola's Dracula. Bram Stoker's Dracula.
Yes.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
And half the time it's not.
Well, I think we're actually, nibbling at a pretty good segue, which is talking about these classic horror movies, which I know have fascinated both of us, and we're both interested, and we're actually doing one of those this week.
We are, and I am thrilled to be announcing that we are doing Well, it is these movies. These are the movies that made us love movies. These movies were out before we were born. So we watched them on television, likely in a rerun. And today we're going to be discussing 1953's House of Wax, starring Vincent Price, horror icon and legend. Yep. It is the story. I'll give a brief synopsis. It's the story of an artist named Professor Henry Girard, who has this really incredible lifelike exhibit of wax figures from history. He gets in a fight with his landlord because I guess the museum is not making any money, and the landlord
it's his business partner. It's his business partner.
Yeah, right. It's his landlord and business partner. Yeah, And the
Well, his
guy
patron. Yeah.
and he decides, wow, we can make a lot of money if we burn this down and get the insurance. And Vincent Price is like, no, this is my work. We can't do that. They get in a fight. The place burns down. And then mysteriously, some time goes by. The museum is back and filled with even more lifelike wax figurines of people in history. And I'll leave it at that. We'll let the mystery go as we discuss.
Yes, I think that's a pretty good, small teaser synopsis for it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So what do you think? I mean, I've got some history on this film that we can talk about, but what was your introduction to this film? Do you remember when the first time was you saw this film?
I don't remember the first time really, but I know it was Shock Theater. It was probably a Saturday afternoon at home watching it. Sometimes, I think there was 1 or 2 years there where Shock Theater did 2 movies back to back. And I think this was part of like a double Vincent Price day. I seem to remember that. I remember I watching it again for this podcast was the first time I've seen it literally in decades. And it was interesting watching it again and saying, okay, I see some of the novelty of it, but I'm not really, it's not scary at all.
No, not really.
It's not really dynamically told from a story point of view. I do like the director. I think he was really good in some of the things he did. I think Vincent Price is phenomenal in it. He's probably, of all of those icons, he's probably the best, or maybe tied with Peter Cushing, in my opinion.
Okay.
He's just able to express such subtlety and also such over-the-top camp craziness, like Fibes or something else. But I was going, okay, would this be in my top 25 horror movies of all time? No, it wouldn't be. It was okay,
not at all.
but I wasn't really, impacted by it, I have to say, unfortunately, because it is a classic. I mean, I think it's up there classic-wise with all of the pre-Hammer movies.
Yeah, because it was in the early 50s.
Yeah. Because this was before Hammer, right? I mean, I'm pretty sure it was.
If not, it was similar. I mean, same timeline. I can't remember. What was the first Hammer major one? Was it The Curse of Frankenstein?
I thought so, but I'm not certain.
Or either that or maybe Horror of Dracula. And those could have potentially been in the 50s, but I would say it was probably more the late 50s.
Actually, the very first Hammer movie was in 1953.
Oh, we were right on it then.
Yeah.
And what was that? Do you know?
Hold on, and I will tell you. I can't find it now, but I will.
Well, you can tell us in a second, and I will tell you that one of the reasons that Vincent Price is so good in this movie is that he had done probably 100 movies prior to this. This was the movie that he did that was his first horror movie, or at least the one that put him on the map for it, that reinvigorated his career and got him suddenly being cast in all the horror movies. This was the one.
So this was his first horror movie?
Yeah. Yeah,
Really?
As a matter of fact, the second one was in 1958, and that was The Fly. The third was The Tingler in 1959. And then he did Return of the Fly and The House on Haunted Hill in 1959. So he did 5 horror movies in the 1950s, and those were them.
Well, and we need to do The Fly at some point because it's both horror and science fiction. It's one of those hybrids. And I really like that movie a lot. I like him and David Hedison in it. So I like that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, going back to your Hammer thing, it was 1955. I correct myself. And it was, they first did a BBC thing called the Quartermass Experiment.
You're right. I read about that.
And then they did their first big horror movie, which was Curse of Frankenstein.
Yeah, and the reason I know that is because of that documentary that I just watched on uh, Amazon. I'll put links to it in the show notes because I can't remember the name of it. But there's three of them. One's Universal, one's Hammer, and then one's Sci-Fi. But they're all done by the same people. And they talk a lot about Quatermass.
I did think the aesthetic of this was very Hammer. It was sound stages with good lighting, with unique camera work to it, but everybody's shown in a very color saturated way. Does that make sense? Like even the girl's hair and the lipstick and everything is color saturated almost, and that's a very distinctive look to me. That had I not known this was who was it, Warner's? Had I not known this was Warner's, I would think this was Hammer.
Yeah, it's definitely Warner Brothers. It was their first 3D movie, as a matter of fact. And we were talking about introductions to the film. I don't distinctly remember the first time I saw it, but I definitely remember a time in Morristown when some local channel from Knoxville was airing it, and they were actually giving 3D glasses out at either like McDonald's or some like convenience store chain or somewhere where you could get the glasses so that you could watch it when it aired that Saturday night.
Oh, I remember that. That's true. Yeah.
It was in like the late 70s, early 80s. I can't remember the time, but I do remember them airing it in 3D on television. So
interesting. I do remember that. Mm-hmm. They did that as part of like a cross promotion with whatever the store was, or the convenience store or whatever. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
A little other, some more history on it. It was filmed in January and February and released in April, which is just unheard of these days.
Oh, you couldn't do that these days. Yeah, not with a genre piece.
No. Warner Brothers' biggest success since Life with Father in 1947. Andre Detoth, also directed a movie called Crime Wave that starred Charles Bronson and Phyllis Kirk and was written by Crane Wilbur. All three, same people from this film. Detoth convinced Jack Warner to do it in 3D, so Jack gave him $1,250,000, and he shot it in 28 days for less than half of that, $618,000.
Oh my gosh!
I mean, these are old school people. I was looking at Andre Detoth and Crane Wilbur, the director and writer, and this was one of Crane's last films. This guy was writing screenplays for silent films.
Right. Well, they were both old school.
Right, and it explains some of the what I wrote as heavy-handed expository stuff in that first scene. It's like, wow, there's a lot of shit happening and a lot of information coming at me in the first 5 minutes of this movie. But so it's not a perfect film.
I got the impression that, almost everybody in this was a contract player. That they were all under Warner's contract. It was like, hey, we're doing a horror movie next month. You're doing it. Okay. You got to be in 2 scenes or whatever. It felt like that. I mean, I definitely can see now why it was a Vincent Price vehicle. He is the through line of the entire story. He's It's interesting that like a lot of the horror movies at the time, he's both the hero and the villain. They did that with Dracula. They did that with the Wolfman. They did that with Frankenstein, Dr. Frankenstein. And this is another one of those where literally he starts as the hero, then becomes the villain, and we kind of feel sorry for him at the end or whatever, but
there's actually a strong key element in that we'll touch on too when we get to the keys.
Okay. Well, I just have general notes on it that I just took while I was watching it, which was I really had to put my cinema appreciation hat on. Because I'd been watching The Expanse, on my travel this weekend. So I'd watched like 4 episodes of it, all modern, very high level science fiction. And now I'm going, whoa. Okay, go back. Go back to 1953, and look at it and appreciate it for that. And by about 20 minutes into it, I did have that nostalgia feel to it again. It was like I was sitting there on Saturday afternoon, on the couch watching, shock theater again.
Right. And you start to realize those aren't wax figures. Those look like real people.
Right.
And they are. They're actors just standing really still, in some of those shots.
But well done. I mean, very well. One of those, I don't know if that could be done even as well today. I think they just took bit players and threatened them and said, you're not going to get your paycheck for a month unless you stand here and don't blink or whatever. I like the production design. I think the Wax Museum, especially, both of them were creepy. Were well shot, well laid out for camera work. I think the stunt work all the way through it is terrible. I just think the stunt doubles don't work, and it's like, is the rail going to break? It's supposed to break, but it didn't break. Okay, throw him against it again.
And it did break, so just hit it harder this time. Yeah, that was hilarious.
It's like, throw him against it again.
I forgot all about that.
And it was like, okay, I know I totally missed you, but you still act like I hit you, okay? And
well, and you were talking about, abusing contract players. Another reason why some of that shit may have happened is because they literally set the set on fire and it got out of hand and burned a hole in the soundstage roof. And even what's his face, Vincent Price, singed his eyebrows and got burnt. I mean, there was some legitimate fire chaos going on in that scene.
Yeah,
too. I did read about that.
But I also have in my notes, it is one of the slowest burning fires in history. I mean, because it literally, that fire sequence takes like 15 minutes. I'm going, okay.
Right. But I also read that when the firemen and the authorities arrived to put it out, Andre de Toth was still filming the wax figures melting and stuff. I mean, while they were putting the fire out, which is just hilarious.
That to me worked. I loved all
that kind of shit.
I loved all the melting. That was creepy, and everything. Although I did see wires at one point, I think, with Marie Antoinette or Joan of Arc, one of them. I could see wires where they were dismantling or pulling them down or whatever. But I did think that was a cool kind of Gothic approach to the beginning of the story. Oh, and you'll appreciate this though, because we normally do casting now, or in this part of the podcast, and
I have a little bit.
Well, here's a good segue to it, because it got to that section after the fire, and then the very next scene is the partner, landlord, owner guy flirting with the blonde girl. And, she has the really high voice and everything else. And I have, oh my God, this blonde girl's voice is annoying. Oh my God, who is this blonde girl? Wait, that's Morticia. That's what my notes say.
Morticia, Carolyn Jones, whom we have also discussed a lot here lately with our Star Trek podcast, as well as I think we mentioned that she was up for Lila Crane in Psycho.
Yeah.
As well. She was another one of those players that was up for that part. And since we are segueing into casting, I think you'll find it funny that Sue Allen, who was played by Phyllis Kirk, Vera Miles was up for her part.
Ah, okay.
And that's, Vera Miles from Psycho. So a lot of Psycho connection in this House of Wax. And of course, Psycho came out about 7 years later. Another woman up for the the Sue Allen part was Joan Weldon, who I have no idea who that is.
Well, what happened to Kirk, the lead in this? Because she was really good. I thought she was attractive. She did the part well. Everything else. What happened to her after it? Because I don't remember her at all.
Let's come back to it. The only other casting thing I have is I love Dabbs Greer, who played Sergeant Jim Shame. You see him; he's like a character actor that's been in a billion things.
Yes,
especially in the '70s television market. And then, of course, Igor was a deaf mute, played by Charles Bronson, who, of course, went on to become an action actor in the 70s with movies like Death Wish. However, he was billed in this film as Charles Buchinski, which I'm assuming might be his real name.
Really? Okay. And then he went on to do the television show too, Beretta, right? That was his big television thing.
No. That was Robert Blake.
Oh, okay. Bronson
You're confusing
was
Charles Bronson and Robert Blake.
Yeah, they were my separated at births at one time. They so wait, he did Death Wish,
They
right?
both have squinty eyes.
And that little cheesy accent. Yeah, okay.
Okay.
Your Phyllis Kirk girl was the Thin Man. She was Nora Charles. That's what her big predominant thing was.
You are on the exact same page I am on right now. She also did Twilight Zone episodes, so you may have seen her there.
Yeah, but I didn't really. That's why it's sad. I kind of like her. But Dabbs Greer, you're right. He was great, and he was in so much stuff.
Well, and she was in The Sad Sack, which was a Jerry Lewis movie. And when I was a kid, I used to watch Jerry Lewis movies. So I could have seen her in there. But yeah, I don't know much else about her. And I will concur that Carolyn Jones's voice was really annoying as Kathy.
Mm-hmm.
So when she got killed, I was not disappointed.
Yeah, true.
So I guess we could mention for all you delicate readers out there or listeners out there that haven't seen this film or guessed the conclusion, Vincent Price as Henry Girard actually survives the fire, even though it was led to believe he died, and returns as a disfigured madman that opens another museum and creates his figures out of real human bodies, coated in wax, which I always wondered, wouldn't they start to smell?
Well, if they're
Like,
totally
wouldn't that give him
sealed,
away?
they wouldn't. You wouldn't get any decomp if they're sealed. I know that from my CSI research. I watched that religiously.
CSI, House of Wax Edition.
Yes, there was even one where, they didn't know a body was even there until they excavated because it had been sealed in concrete. So there was no odor, no nothing, whatever. But as long as the wax was sealed, I think there would be no odor. But it's also weird too because you'd have to reinforce the body. You'd have to. I mean, practically, this makes no sense to cover people in wax.
No sense at all.
But
right.
But we go along with the conceit because Vincent is so convincing.
Right. It's a cool concept, and for a kid, it's mesmerizing.
Yeah. And creepy, wax figures are creepy. They are in general. I don't know. I don't think people like to see reality recreated like that, sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
I think script-wise, the script is probably the least compelling part of this to me in this movie.
Yeah. And if you look at his history, I mean, he wrote scripts for hundreds of B movies all the way back until 1915.
And maybe that's
so
it.
This guy was churning them out.
He thought, this was just a churn that he did. The cops are typical cops and act like cops, even down to saying, misogynistic things like "leave it to a skirt to dream up that crazy idea" or whatever that he said at that one part. And they're always late. They're always late to the game in every single scene.
And one thing I never caught, and it kind of bothered me, is what time period did this take place in? It was after the Civil War. We know that because they mention John Wilkes Booth as one of the figurines.
Right, but I would think it would be in like the 1890s in that time frame.
Okay.
It was definitely before the turn of the century because they, even in his throwaway, try to be funny lines like the two orderlies who are talking about a car. And there was a car accident at the morgue, or one of the bodies in the morgue is from a car accident. And he goes, "I didn't think those things went fast enough to hurt anybody." And the other guy goes, "Well, give him time, give it time."
They also mentioned the execution of some guy by electric chairs, and so that means it had to have taken place after that person was, and I'm not sure who it was, but it was apparently some famous execution in history.
It was the first. I think it was the first. He said it. It was the first electric chair in New York. So maybe that was.
Yeah. So it would have had to have been after that too. But you don't see. I mean, you see cobblestone streets like it's London.
Right. Or horse-drawn.
I didn't see any cars.
No, never saw any cars. Yeah. Horse-drawn fire engine, horse-drawn police paddy wagon. The fashion is very 1890s with all the hats for the women and the tight long skirts and all that. That was kind of.
I just don't recall them mentioning a year.
No, I don't think they did actually.
No.
I have for New York City. It's pretty damn deserted because during that chase scene, literally there is no one else in the entire city but the two of them running.
Yeah, it's like an old Jack the Ripper movie. Yeah, that's what it reminded me of.
Oh yeah, definitely. And then and also, you know, him hobbling and bent over and all that, but suddenly by the end of the movie he can run up steps and fight people and do all. I thought that was weird. But great lighting. Really, really great lighting all the way through. The way he used shadows, and sometimes the camera would pan over and you just see the shadow of an exhibit, and then it would pan over and you would see that that's one of the, you know, that's Joan of Arc, or that's, you know, one of the guillotine or whatever. So really great lighting, I thought, all the way through it.
Yeah, and great makeup too.
I thought it was good makeup. I really did. Although Vincent, you know, when you see Gerard at his new exhibit, you know, he's in his wheelchair, but he's talking to everybody and smiling and doing all this. And then when she knocks it off, it's like hard wax. And I was going, okay, so that doesn't work. I mean, he wouldn't be able to talk and wink and do all that crap with hard wax on his
No, yeah. I mean, that was their way of revealing it. I'm talking about the makeup of him as he really looks, as the burnt.
And I think it looks best in the shortest scene. It looks best in the scene where he, you know, plays Tarzan and swings over to her room, and then it's so well lit in that scene and looks great, but we only get a couple of seconds of it. You know, but it's good makeup. Mm-hmm. That's in my notes too about, gosh, this guy with a cape sure has a lot of rope. I mean, because every scene he's like pulling out rope after rope after rope.
You might be surprised to know that it's a remake. Did you know that?
No, I did not. That's a key I would
It's a remake of 1933's Mystery of the Wax Museum, starring Fay Wray.
No. Really?
Mm-hmm. A little bit of a Rocky Horror key there.
Yeah. Just looking at my notes, I have like just 3 or 4 more notes just from watching it. So the first one is, wow, that's a huge freaking basement. How much rent is this place? Because it's like 4 freaking stories tall. That's good. Gee. And in New York City alone, oh my God. Nothing says vintage like a good intermission.
I was going to ask you, what did you think of the intermission? And how about that? Huh?
I love it. I was going, that is great.
Did you notice that the ping pong paddle guy was breaking the fourth wall?
Oh, yeah, that bothered me. I didn't like that
when he said something about him putting his ball in your popcorn or whatever, or your mouth.
Yep.
Wow, that sounds provocative.
I didn't like...
Let me put my ball in your mouth.
Yeah. I don't think he said that per se. I think he said, you know... I did read in my trivia search that was what do they call them? An anachronism, because supposedly if the movie was set in 1890, even if it was set in 1900 or 1910, paddle balls like that weren't invented until after 1920. So that was an anachronism.
Well, now that's some research.
Yeah.
I have some great lines. I love when that guy rushes in and says, I tell you, the scream came from up there.
Yeah. Right. And then he makes her go first.
Yeah. And then I love when the corpse in the morgue sits up and the guy goes, it's the embalming fluid.
Yeah, you'll get used to that. Yeah.
I was like, wait a minute. I don't think that really happens.
Now, okay, wait. This is a personal story, a little segue, because I think you knew this, but my grandfather and my father were both embalmers. They had a Horton funeral home.
Right.
Well,
Right.
my father, one of the few stories that he ever shared with me about that time and whatever was, he had a really, really obnoxious state trooper who, anytime he brought in a dead body or anything like that, or was there for any kind of case or whatever, insisted on going into the embalming room. He just wanted to be around the dead bodies and stuff. And Dad didn't like that, and it wasn't policy for the funeral home and everything else. Anyway, and this guy was just a real jerk and obnoxious. So there was one time where the guy came back there, and Dad was working on a body and was starting the embalming process. And when the embalming fluid is settling in the bodies, the muscles constrict and everything else, and they do move. And he noticed while he was working, he had folded the body's arms across its chest. And he noticed that the left arm was starting to raise up, just really slowly raise up by itself, right? And so, and at the time, the cop was like standing behind him, just leaning against the wall, being a jerk and asking questions and all that. And he said, so what he did was he took the bottle of embalming fluid and put it in the body's hand and said, here, hold this for me a minute, and walked away. And the arm just kept slowly rising up and everything else. And he said that cop turned as white as the wall, and he never came back in the embalming room again after that.
Good for him.
But so, yes, they do obviously move when you embalm them.
Well, I mean, I knew there was movement and like gases and noises and things, but just to see that guy sit up like that,
yeah,
I was like, I don't think that happens. I've heard there's trouble, keeping eyelids shut too.
Yes, that is true too. They have to usually sew or glue those. Yeah, do that. Yep.
But yeah. And then what's very comical and well done as far as the director, is as soon as those guys leave, it cuts to another body in the morgue sitting up, and of course it's Vincent Price because he's waiting for them to leave.
Right, which is an odd way to sneak into the morgue, but there you go.
But very effective.
Or very effective, yeah. Well, that was another thing, too. He was looking for the body of her because he wants to turn her into Joan of Arc, right? This is, in the plot. He wants to turn her into Joan of Arc. And the first two people he looks at are obviously guys. I was going, okay, go for the one with the small waist and the big boobs. That's probably the girl, but he doesn't. He pulls back the other ones. I'm like, what? Dude, that's not her.
Oh, my God. Here you are again, bringer of logic.
I'm just, and from a storytelling angle, I was going, okay, and maybe, I wanted to bring this up because maybe it's me and my old age or whatever, but I noticed like the misogyny in this movie. It's pretty prevalent all the way through of putting these women in their place and keeping them in their place and all of that, and them having to do the stuff of her actually getting into a corset so tight she can barely breathe to make an impression on a guy, kind of thing. And I told you like that one line about leave it to a skirt to think up a crazy idea like that or whatever he said. But then they have also the whole can pantaloon number, and I'm going, okay, guys, I know it's 3D, and I know these are girls with fishnet hose, but really? We have to use this camera work. It was just odd to me.
That's a good segue. I have a little bit of trivia. Did you know that Andre de Toth was blind in one eye?
I did. I had read that, which means 3D kind of probably didn't work for him.
No, it didn't work at all for him, and yet he directed the film.
Yeah.
And they obviously threw some gimmicks in, like the paddle ball and the women kicking their legs and things, because it was 3D.
Yeah.
But most of the film was successful because they didn't do that. It may have been in 3D, but it was still, telling a story of, the quote mad scientist or whatever, and the damsel in distress.
Mm-hmm.
I found that refreshing, actually. Did you read about any of its history as far as preservation?
No, the only thing that I found in research was that one of the audio tracks was destroyed, or had
Right.
had become destroyed, so they never have the stereophonic sound like they did. But there was something weird. I didn't take notes on it. There was something weird about then later on a version of it had it on there or something.
They found like one, yeah, a copy. The 3D Blu-ray that came out in 2014 cost $300,000 to do.
Okay.
They used the original negatives, the original negatives had water damage, so they had to put all this stuff back together, including the fact that sound track didn't exist anymore, the stereophonic one you mentioned.
Right.
But as far as awards, it was a nominee for the Best Blu-ray Special Edition release in Academy of Science Fiction, Fantasy, and Horror. But the National Film Registry, it won for National Film Preservation. It was evidently a really high-end re-release for such a crazy, kooky 1953 movie, don't you think?
Yeah. Yeah, I do.
I mean, it makes me kind of proud to be an American to think that they would go back and try to preserve this film.
I think that, yeah.
I mean, it's special to me because it's, Vincent Price, and it's his first, real horror movie before a long line of them. And I'm just glad that America's out there preserving the horror for us, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then it won Best Film and Director in 1953 for the San Sebastian International Film Festival. Whatever that is. So it did win a few awards. And I looked up that Blu-ray because I was like, you know what? I wouldn't mind having that. You know how much that thing costs now?
No.
$90.
Really? For an 88-minute Blu-ray of Vincent Price? Okay.
Of House of Wax.
Wow.
$90. I guess it just went out of print. I don't know.
It would be interesting to see it in 3D. I've never seen it in 3D. And since that's the way they originally intended it, it would be cool to see that.
Those were the last little bits of trivia that I had before we head toward keys, if you want to get into keys.
Sure. I mean, I think the biggest key is going to be the fact that you've already said it, but the fact that this kicked off Vincent Price's career as far as horror movies go. This was, his introduction as a horror villain.
Yeah, I mean, he was in some movies. I can't remember the one he was known for the most. It wasn't Rebecca, but it was one like that.
Mm-hmm.
But Vincent Price was much like Boris Karloff in that he played bit parts in hundreds of movies before he got noticed. And this is pretty much the one that put him on the map.
Yeah, it's like I said, this was mostly, contract players to the entire thing. So, it's not unusual to have that, but he kind of broke out and then established this. He became the new Vincent Price. I mean, the new Bela Lugosi, I think.
Oh, speaking of which, I'll segue just a bit.
Yes.
As a publicity stunt, Bela Lugosi was hired to appear at the premiere in his cape with a gorilla on a leash. And it was a man in a costume. It wasn't a real gorilla.
But why was he? Why would he have a gorilla?
Well, I will tell you, David. It's funny that you asked.
Please do.
It is because that Bela Lugosi was in a movie coincidentally entitled Bela Lugosi Meets a Brooklyn Gorilla. So,
oh my God.
He was hyping his own movie at the premiere
Oh
of
my
this
God.
movie. And he was hired to do it. I thought that was hilarious.
Hey, Bella.
So that was during, yeah, I mean, that was in the midst of his drug addiction and downfall. And
Hey, Bella, you want to make rent this week? You're going to go take us, Gorilla. You're going to go down here to the theater and you're going to say hi to Vincent.
Right. Right. The only movies I can think of that Vincent Price was known for prior to his horror movie stints are a movie called Laura with Gene Tierney and Dana Andrews. And then he also had a small part in The Ten Commandments, the Cecil B. DeMille.
Yeah, he was the evil guy whipping the slaves that Moses had to kill. That's the reason Moses couldn't go into the promised land, you know. You have to know these things.
Right. So again, just like Boris Karloff, Vincent Price was just a bit player in most movies until he all of a sudden was in this movie and people were like, damn, he can act. He's a great horror movie director. Let's put him in a bunch of things from here to eternity.
Oh, yeah.
Not literally.
And he, yeah.
So that is a big key, the fact that Vincent Price, this reignited his career. I mentioned earlier that there's a theme going on that's very prevalent in a lot of older horror movies, and it is the artist gone mad theme or the mad scientist theme, and that they have an assistant named Igor.
Yeah, there's that. Definitely those keys are in there.
So I think there's a direct tie to this film, to Frankenstein.
Of course.
And of course Igor was Fritz in Frankenstein. So,
but we all think of it as Igor just because.
Igor.
Frankenstein.
Another key I have is the whole Phantom of the Opera vibe going on.
Very much.
Yeah, I mean, you've got the guy going around with the big hat and the cape hiding his face. Sue is basically the Christine part. You know, she's the damsel that he may not be in love with her, but he's definitely longing for her to be his creation, you know, in the museum.
Very much so.
And back to what we were saying, the makeup reminds me of Hammer too, because Hammer was known for taking the Universal monsters and really making them scary. Like the Curse of Frankenstein, Christopher Lee looked, I mean, his face looked like it was pieced together. Dracula had the really bloody eyes, you know. They just did more with makeup than some of the universe. Well, for instance, I'll segue into this. I read this, but I didn't write it down. Vincent Price was kindly asked not to return to the commissary. Sorry, I can't say that word. After he showed up one day in his makeup from House of Wax, because he made people sick, and freaked them out with it. So, which I found hilarious, and you could tell that he probably did it on purpose. I also read somewhere where he would go see versions of House of Wax at various theaters incognito, and then after the movie was over, he would like sit up and whisper in someone's ear and scare the shit out of them.
That's a good idea. Yeah.
You know, how did you like it? Yeah, that kind of thing. Because, you know, he's got a voice like no other.
And didn't we're talking about keys, so didn't House of Wax inspire a bunch of other waxes? I know they had a remake, which I heard was terrible.
Are you talking about that Paris Hilton shit from the... Yeah. It is bad. I can't even remember it, honestly, but I did watch it. It came out in 2005, and it was some kind of Paris Hilton vehicle.
Some kind of what?
And you saw where that went. Paris Hilton.
Yeah.
Vehicle, like she was a co-star in it or something. I don't know. It's obviously forgettable because, well, here you are. There is one Wax Museum movie that it directly inspired that I will mention. I don't know if I've seen this, and if I have, it's been a long time. And it was called Terror in the Wax Museum, and it came out in 1973. And listen to this cast.
Wait, that had Ray Milland in it.
Ray Milland.
Yep, I remember Ray Milland.
Ray Milland. Yep. Elsa Lancaster. That's Bride of Frankenstein herself.
Uh-huh.
Maurice Evans. Dr. Zaius. and John Carradine.
Oh my God.
And guess who produced it?
I do not know.
You'll never guess.
I
Throw it. Throw out something there. Throw something crazy out there.
a crazy producer?
Or actor. Or singer. Bing Crosby. One of the things that bums me out is I'm really finding myself reinvigorated by some of these older movies that we do.
Okay.
Like this, or The Day the Earth Stood Still, and Psycho. Have you noticed that they're the ones that you always have to pay for? That they're never streaming. You can't find them streaming anywhere.
No. You know, like TNT, Ted Turner Classics or whatever, TCM.
Actually, he does. I mean, there is one for TCM, but they don't have a large library on demand. Mm-hmm. I do go there to look for these movies, and rarely do I find them there. I have found a few. And then I found, like, I'm looking for War of the Worlds right now because we're getting ready to do that. And it's not available anywhere. I don't have a DVD of it, so I'm going to have to rent it, even though I've seen it, a million times. However, there is I can't remember the name of it, but there's a service out there. If you have a library card, you can log into this website and give them your library card number and watch it. And I was like, damn, I wish I had a library card.
But in researching it, there wasn't a lot of wax museum movies.
It does seem like there were more than I'm finding too. I'm looking up Chamber of Horrors right now. Wasn't there one called Chamber of Horrors, or is that just something that Ripley's did?
I don't.
Or not Ripley. It was Madame Tussauds. Madame Tussauds had a Chamber of Horrors, like in the basement. It was the scary part of the museum where they had the guillotine and things like that. There was a movie called Chamber of Horrors in 1940 and 1966, but I don't know if those are wax museum movies or not. But anyway, that was the last key I had, was the one with the Paris Hilton. You'd already got that one.
And that's really the last one I had too. When were the Fibes movies?
Fibes were, I think, early 70s.
Yeah.
I love those movies.
I do
I would
too.
do the first one in a heartbeat. That would be another one we could add to the list.
I think he did 3 of them, but they were all
and
great.
They were AIP, weren't they?
Yeah.
I don't think those were Hammer.
No, I think
those were like American International Pictures.
Yeah, I think they were AIP. I think you're totally right.
I'm looking at Vincent Price. There's other things we haven't touched on. I mean, I think his last film was Edward Scissorhands, which was a great movie.
Great movie.
But he also did voiceovers for Alice Cooper. He did voiceovers for Michael Jackson on iconic tracks from iconic albums. I mean, Welcome to My Nightmare.
Yep.
Major album in American history.
Yeah, big key.
Thriller.
There.
Major album in American history. And Vincent Price is on both of them. But yeah, we could easily go back and find another Price. And that's kind of what I'm trying to do when we pick these films. I'm trying to pick them from different decades, and I'm trying to pick them, from various iconic images, whether it be the monster or the actor.
Yeah.
And he is definitely the actor in this one.
And listeners out there, maybe there's one you want us to do. So let us know.
Yeah, I've been starting to come up with a list to merge with the list we had last year that did not make the cut, so that we can, and so anyone that wants to throw some more our way, let me know. For instance, someone threw Terminator at me earlier this year, and it's going to end up being in this season. So yeah, for sure, we'd love to hear from you.
We would. So let us know.
Yeah, but I think that's going to wrap it up for House of Wax, 1953.
House of Wax. Yep.
All right, well, David, I guess we will be talking to you soon.
We will.
For our next venture into sci-fi land.
Yep. And we'll go from there next time we see you.